I'm delighted to be here with this inspiring crew of young people who are working to protect and preserve our environment. I have been working in environmental conservation for most of my youth and adult life, and it is just thrilling to me to see another cadre of young people who are in very creative, original ways stepping up to join elders and to bring a new perspective and views and energy to the work which we do. You folks are not alone. Today what I want to do is just to talk a little bit about my thinking about part of what motivates me, and also how we can reframe what on earth we're doing on this planet in a way that can help motivate us to have an even greater impact. We live in a society that rewards and celebrates rugged individualism, getting more stuff for myself, competition, and these sorts of values make it difficult to get a lot of stuff done in the environment. This framework that it's all about me against everybody else, and how can I get more stuff for me in my little box, and perhaps the small circle of my immediate family. Viewing the world that way is a choice. It's a decision. And what you want to do is decide whether or not you are going to believe and follow that model. Because the model that you see of why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing is going to impact and change the way we actually do things. So if we're told that everything is a hierarchy, and that your goal is just to progressively build yourself up, often at the expense of other people, if you're thinking that you're responsible for just the small group of people around you, this is going to affect the outcomes of how you act in the world and what you do. I'm going to suggest to you that this choice of viewing the world this way is just a choice, and I'm going to suggest an alternative model. One that is rooted in ecology. One that is rooted in the principles that I observe every time that I go out into the woods and out into nature and observe things. And that is, rather than thinking about the world as a hierarchy and who's on top, to start thinking about it as networks and connections and relationships. So let's just start with our relationship with nature. One of our speakers talked about nature deficit disorder, the degree to which we are separated from nature. Youth these days are spending more time. A lot of people have more practice doing this than this, right? Or this, or walking around in the field finding bugs. The secret here is that there is an infinite world of wonder and beauty right outside of the point where we usually just stop paying attention. And if we can get ourselves to go out into nature and to explore, we start to break down the walls of the box that we put ourselves in. We find the world is much bigger, much more beautiful and wonderful. The secret to building this relationship with nature, I'm going to suggest two things: attention and curiosity. How to pay attention more deeply, and how to make yourself more curious about what you see. If you ever go out hiking with a bird watcher, sometimes you'll see that people they'll spot something, they'll identify it, and they're like, oh good, I know what this is, and then they're on to the next thing. But that's actually just scratching the surface of where the mystery begins. And to intentionally push yourself every time you go out to try to learn something new, to notice something that you never noticed before, dramatically opens the world. And by curiosity, I'm constantly asking myself, what's going on here? What is happening in a place or within an organism that I have never noticed before? And trying to weed out new nature mysteries all the time. If you do this, exploring in nature is a constant source of refreshment and curiosity. And for people who are working in environmental conservation and preservation, one of the things which we have to do is to get ourselves back into nature on a more regular basis. If we're not getting out there, we lose track of why on earth we're doing this. Right? And for elders in this room, think about the last time that you gave yourself and your family permission to get out into the woods and just have free time to explore. If it feels like too long, it probably is. And you can do something about that tomorrow. In addition to connection with nature, we want to think about our relationships, not just with the natural world, but with the built environment and the stuff that accumulates all around us. The more that we start to think about my relationship towards all these things I buy, that changes the way I interact with all that stuff. If I'm using the model of my goal is just to get as much stuff in my little box as I possibly can, that will dictate how you consume, that will dictate how you buy and how you throw things away. But if you think like an ecologist, what you're doing is thinking upstream and downstream. And that means you're thinking into the past, where did this come from? And into the future, where is it going next? So, for instance, what are the impacts of buying this shoe or this little tablet or this gizmo? What is the impact that that had on natural systems? What is the impact that that had on quasi-natural systems, say with our friends the cows? Right? I'm wearing a leather belt. I've got leather in my shoes. Right? The choices that I'm making are impacting species. The more that I am conscious of those decisions and those relationships, the more I'm in a place to make an empowered decision about it. What is the impact on my purchasing decisions on the workers, on the people who build the stuff that I use? What are the byproducts of that? Right? Are there any toxins that are produced by that? If so, where do they go? If I'm just thinking about filling my box with stuff, those sorts of questions are not my problem. But if I'm thinking like an ecologist and thinking of myself in relationship to other things in the world, all of a sudden this becomes a key part of what I regularly think about and how I make my decisions. That's all sort of thinking into the past. Thinking into the future, when I'm done with this, what am I going to do with it? Is that going to the dump? Is that going to end up in a trash heap somewhere? Is there a way of reusing that or repurposing those sorts of things? Again, having a framework where I'm thinking in terms of connections will guide me to make those sorts of decisions. So here I've talked a little bit about a relationship to nature, relationship to stuff, and I also saw a lot of stuff in that video about the sorts of projects that people have taken on where people are very deliberately and very intentionally thinking about their relationship to other people. If all I'm responsible for is my immediate friends and family, that dictates my decisions. But the more that I start to try to break down the relationships, to get myself to pay attention to other people, to intentionally be curious about other people. Think if you were really honestly curious about what motivated somebody else, what made them make the decisions that they make in their lives, would it be possible to be truly violent to that person? There is so much sort of animosity towards people who think differently than we do that I see all over the media, and in this political season, we see this all over the place. Somebody who disagrees with me is a threat. Right? This is the last person that I want to deal with. Right? We'll either cast these people as insane, evil, or motivated by terrible things, or just badly informed. There's also the possibility that I could be wrong about some of the important values that I hold dear. So if I am intentional about really being curious about what motivates another person, it's going to stretch me. It's going to change the way that I think and the way that I interact with people who agree with me, the way I interact with people who disagree with me. All of a sudden, those people are a potential source of a chance to change my mind or get greater insight about the world. If I think that I've got it figured out right now, I'm wrong, because I think different things now than I did 2 years ago. And if I'm not changing my mind like that, I'm not paying attention. And people who disagree with me are one of the greatest sources of that kind of motivation and inspiration. So I want to extend my relationships out to a larger community. And then I also want to think in terms of not just networks within that community. I want to think about my relationships between other communities that I'm not really a part of. Right? How does what I'm doing connect with what somebody else holds dear and is important to them? If I can link up those sorts of common interests, if I can find that common ground, we have the seeds there for building a movement for political change. So by extending my world, by getting out of my box and getting into a place where I'm interacting with more people, where I am having my views challenged by people who think differently than I do, being willing to change my mind, thinking about what is my responsibility to protect to nature, to thinking about the impacts of all the little decisions that I make, to a larger community of stewards, of elders, of youth, I have a much greater capacity to be impactful as an environmentalist, as a conservationist, but also my world is going to be richer. The more that I break down those bonds, those barriers, the more beautiful this life becomes, the more precious this life becomes. Making myself vulnerable to that beauty and wonder then becomes another thing that motivates me to go out into the world and to work to make change. So I want to challenge everybody in this room, the esteemed guests in the front row, the elders who are sitting in the back of this room, to think about your world and the networks of relationships. And to notice, is there a point that I am putting down a wall, and on the other side of that are the bad guys. On the other side of that are the others who are just misguided, misinformed, or perhaps just have bad motivation for what they're doing. Perhaps it's my framework of thinking of the world in that dualistic way, right? That is preventing me from having a greater impact in what I do. The more we tear down walls, the more we build bridges and connections to other people, the more all of us have the ability to have an impact. Again, I am honored and delighted to be in this room with these young people who are stepping up already, and you guys already are thinking in networks. Right? You wouldn't be here if you weren't thinking like an ecologist. Right? And thinking beyond just your immediate needs. Let's take your example, everyone in this room, and see what we can do ourselves as a larger community of stewards of nature to move forward and protect this beautiful green earth. Thank you.